Okay, so for this deep dive, you sent in a review.
Yeah.
A review from 2004.
Wow, that's going back a ways.
It is. It's called How Future Goals Enhance Motivation and Learning in Multicultural Classrooms.
Okay.
It's by Fillet, Andreessen, and Lenz.
Those are some familiar names in this field. So what is it about this review that really caught your attention? What did you want to dive into?
Well, it looks at something that I think we all kind of intuitively understand, but it really breaks it down. What we want for our future, those big dreams and goals we have, how those actually impact how we learn right now, and what really keeps us going, especially when we're in classrooms with people from all different backgrounds.
That's a fascinating area to explore, especially in today's increasingly diverse educational landscape. I mean, it's so crucial to understand how to make learning truly engaging and effective for everyone, regardless of their background. And the idea that tapping into those future aspirations could be a key part of that is definitely worth a closer look. So, where does this review take us? What's the roadmap for this deep dive?
Well, it starts off pretty optimistic, I'd say.
Okay.
It paints this picture of future goals being a huge motivator, especially for minority students. But then it throws in some curveballs, some situations where it's not as simple as that, where things don't quite work out as you might expect. So we're going to navigate through all of that
Okay.
and hopefully come out on the other side with like a much clearer picture of how future goals can actually be a powerful tool for learning, for all students.
Sounds like a journey worth taking. Let's dive in. So, where does this initial optimism stem from? What's the foundation of this idea that future goals are such a powerful force, particularly for minority students?
Well, it starts with the idea of education being seen as this pathway, this investment in the future. And that's pretty consistent across cultures.
Right, that makes sense. Education is often seen as a way to open doors, to create opportunities that might not otherwise be available. So it's the ticket to a better future, in a way. And the review highlights that this belief is particularly strong within immigrant communities, right?
Exactly. And the review actually talks about this idea of what they call immigrant optimism. So across different cultures, you often find this really deep-seated belief that if you do well in school, if you get a good education, it's going to lead to a better life. And the studies that they cite, things like Miller and Kerbo back in '93 and Valet and Kaye in '96, show that this is especially true for ethnic minorities.
They have this strong faith in education as a way to, I guess, improve their lives and their social standing. And what's interesting is that the review suggests that this belief is often even stronger among minority parents, even when compared to native-born parents from similar economic backgrounds.
Yeah, that was a key point. So even when you control for things like socioeconomic status, minority parents, at least according to these studies, seem to hold even higher aspirations for their children's education.
That's really fascinating. It suggests that there's something beyond just economic factors at play here. So what are some of the possible explanations for this heightened sense of optimism, this really strong belief in the power of education, specifically within immigrant communities?
Well, the review delves into a few possible explanations. One is, think about the people who choose to immigrate. They're often already individuals who are super ambitious,
Right.
driven, They're actively seeking out new opportunities, better lives for themselves and their families. So it makes sense that they'd place such a high value on education as a means to achieve those aspirations.
That's a compelling point. It's a self-selecting group, in a way. Individuals who are already oriented towards self-improvement and upward mobility.
Exactly. And then there's the idea that many immigrant families haven't had negative experiences with the education systems in their home countries.
Oh, I see. So they come in with a more positive outlook on education. They might not carry the same baggage or skepticism that some native-born families might have, especially if they've had, let's say, less than ideal experiences with the local school system.
Yeah, and then you can't ignore the very real issue of potential discrimination in the job market.
Right.
For many immigrant families, education might be seen as the most reliable way to overcome those barriers, to prove their worth and secure a decent living. So those are some of the initial factors that might explain this, like pronounced optimism about education's power to transform lives.
So we've got this picture of immigrant families, often more than their native-born counterparts, holding this deep-seated belief in education as the key to a better future. And the review backs this up with some pretty compelling evidence.
Yeah, they highlight a lot of research, both quantitative studies with like large data sets, but also these really fascinating ethnographic study.
Oh, so actually going into communities, observing families, and talking to people directly, that provides a much richer, more nuanced understanding.
Exactly. And what those ethnographic studies show is this really strong emphasis on education within minority families. It's not just a theoretical idea. It's woven into the fabric of their lives. It's part of their larger aspirations, their hopes for the next generation.
So it's almost like an intergenerational mobility project, right? They're investing in their children's education not just for the individual child's benefit, but for the advancement of the entire family lineage.
Exactly. And the review gives some really concrete examples of this in action.
Okay, I'd love to hear about some of those. What are some of the specific instances where we see this immigrant optimism, this future-oriented mindset, actually playing out in the real world?
Well, one example is from a study in Belgium.
Okay.
They found that Turkish immigrant students were way more focused on achievement than native Belgian students from similar socioeconomic backgrounds.
So even when you control for economic factors, these immigrant students are showing a stronger drive to succeed academically.
Yeah. And it wasn't just about grades. They were more likely to see their studies as like a stepping stone to something bigger, to achieving those long-term goals.
They had that future orientation firmly in mind. That's fascinating. Any other examples that really illustrate this point?
Yeah, there's another study from the Netherlands.
Okay.
They looked at Turkish and Moroccan students in high schools there,
Uh-huh.
and they found that they were more motivated, more engaged in their schoolwork compared to native Dutch students from lower income backgrounds.
So again, even when you factor in socioeconomic differences, these minority students are demonstrating higher levels of engagement and motivation.
And here's a really interesting part of that study. The researchers found that minority students were more likely to cite long-term reasons for why they were putting in all this effort.
Okay, so it wasn't just about passing the next test or getting good grades in the short term. What were some of the reasons they gave? What were those long-term drivers?
Things like personal growth, future career opportunities, the ability to earn a good living later on. These were the things that really seemed to be motivating them.
It really underscores that strong future orientation. It's not just about the immediate gratification. It's about seeing their education as an investment in a larger, more fulfilling life down the line. And what about those long-term studies? You mentioned earlier that some studies have followed students over time. What do those reveal about this initial disadvantage and subsequent progress?
Yeah, so longitudinal studies in the UK, France, and Australia, they all kind of tell a similar story. Minority children might start out behind their native-born peers academically,
Okay.
but then they often make greater progress over time.
So they catch up and even surpass their peers. That suggests a pretty remarkable level of sustained motivation.
Exactly, like this persistent drive that helps them close that gap and sometimes even excel beyond their peers.
It's really inspiring, isn't it? It speaks to the power of resilience and the importance of supporting these students in their educational journeys. So what about the role of parents in all of this? You mentioned earlier that parental aspirations seem to play a significant role.
Yeah, and the review actually highlights a bunch of studies that have looked at this, and they consistently find a strong link between parents' educational hopes for their kids, their aspirations, and how well those kids actually perform in school.
So it's not just about the students' own internal drive, but also the support and encouragement they receive from their families. That makes a lot of sense intuitively. A nurturing and supportive home environment can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And the review also found that this belief that education is the key to a good career down the line, like that really strong belief in the instrumentality of education, that's also strongly tied to success in school.
So, those two factors, parents' aspirations and the belief in education's ability to open doors in the future, seem to be really crucial. It kind of paints this picture of a powerful feedback loop, right? Where parents instill this belief in their children, and then that belief actually fuels their academic success, which in turn reinforces the parents' initial hopes and aspirations. And this all ties into what the researchers call the immigrant optimism hypothesis, right?
Yeah, this idea that a big part of this educational progress that we see in minority youth, particularly with the immigrant communities, is driven by their parents' strong belief that education will lead to upward mobility, to a better life for their kids.
So it's not just about individual ambition. It's about this larger generational hope, this belief that education can lift their family to a higher social and economic standing.
Exactly. And the review offers a few possible reasons behind this optimism, some of which we've already touched upon. So one is that the individuals who choose to immigrate might already be more ambitious and driven, actively seeking out better opportunities.
Right. They're not just settling for the status quo, they're actively pursuing a brighter future.
Right. And another reason is that many minority families might not have a history of negative experiences with the education systems in their home countries.
So they see education in a more positive light as this pathway to advancement and a better life.
And then, of course, there's the very real possibility of facing discrimination in the job market. For many immigrants, education might seem like the most reliable way to overcome those barriers, to prove their worth and get ahead. So that's kind of the initial setup, this optimistic view of future goals as this powerful driving force, especially within immigrant communities.
It's a compelling narrative. It speaks to the power of hope and the belief in a better future through education. But as you mentioned earlier, the review doesn't stop there. It delves into some of the complexities and contradictions that emerge. So what are some of the challenges and limitations to this initially optimistic perspective? Where do things start to get a bit more nuanced?
Well, this is where the review gets really interesting, and it introduces this idea of the attitude achievement paradox.
Uh-huh.
So they're basically saying that while disadvantaged minority youth often have really high aspirations, those aspirations don't always translate into high levels of academic achievement.
So there's this disconnect between what they hope for and what they actually achieve in the classroom.
Yeah. And it's particularly noticeable among certain groups like African American youth in the U.S. They might have a really strong desire for upward mobility. They might truly believe in education as a pathway to a better life, but their actual academic outcomes often lag behind.
So what are some of the possible explanations for this paradox? Why do these high aspirations not always translate into concrete success in the classroom?
Well, one of the explanations that the review offers is this really interesting distinction between what they call abstract mobility beliefs and concrete beliefs.
Okay, I'm curious. What's the difference between those two?
So abstract beliefs are like that general understanding that education is important for success in the future.
Right. It's that broad idea that education is valuable.
But concrete beliefs are more about whether a student personally believes that education will actually benefit their own future.
So it's the difference between agreeing with the general principle and truly believing that it will make a tangible difference in their own lives.
Exactly. So it's not enough to just believe in education in this abstract way.
Right. You need to see how it concretely applies to you, to your own aspirations and your own future.
Yeah, and the review highlights studies, especially with African American youth, where they might agree that education is important in general, but they don't necessarily believe that it will make a real difference in their own lives, given the challenges and obstacles they face.
That's a crucial point. It suggests that simply promoting the value of education in a broad sense might not be sufficient. We need to help students connect the dots to see how it directly relates to their own aspirations and their own unique circumstances.
Yeah, and the review even mentions similar findings from a study in Turkey.
Oh, interesting. So this isn't just an American phenomenon.
Not at all. So in Turkey, they found that young people, while they showed a strong commitment to achievement in general, they had lower expectations of actually benefiting personally because they felt like opportunities weren't equal.
So even if they work hard and do well in school, they're not necessarily convinced that it will translate into meaningful opportunities for them in the future.
Exactly. And that perception of limited opportunities, that can be a huge demotivator.
Absolutely. If you don't believe that the system is fair, that your efforts will be rewarded, it's understandable why your motivation might suffer.
And unfortunately, issues like racism and discrimination within the education system, those play a role here too.
Right. Those systemic barriers can create this sense of hopelessness and make it even harder for students to see the value of their efforts.
Yeah. The review cites research that directly links these negative experiences like racism and discrimination in the classroom to lower academic performance and even what they call resistance to schooling.
So it's not just about individual motivation, it's about the context in which they're learning. If students feel that the system is rigged against them, that their efforts won't be acknowledged or rewarded fairly, it's a recipe for disengagement and disillusionment.
Right. And the review even mentions a study where they found that Latino children who felt that it was harder for them to get good grades from their teachers were less likely to pay attention and put in effort in class.
It's heartbreaking, but it also makes sense. If you feel like the deck is stacked against you, why would you put in the effort?
And then there's this whole controversial idea that acting white hypothesis.
Oh, right. That's a really sensitive and complex issue. So
Hmm.
how does the review address that?
So this is the idea that some minority students might actually resist academic success because they see it as conflicting with their ethnic identity. Like they might worry that doing well in school will make them seem like they're trying to be something they're not, that they're abandoning their cultural roots.
It's a really difficult and sensitive topic to discuss, but it's important to acknowledge these potential tensions and complexities, especially in multicultural educational settings. So, how does the review navigate this sensitive terrain?
Well, they're pretty careful about it. They point out that the evidence for this acting white hypothesis is actually pretty mixed.
So, it's not as clear cut as some people might make it out to be.
Yeah. And some studies have even found a positive correlation between having a strong ethnic identity and having high academic self-esteem.
So, it's not necessarily an either situation. You can embrace your cultural heritage and strive for academic success at the same time.
Exactly. And what seems to be more beneficial is what's called a bicultural identity. So that's where you feel a sense of belonging to both your own ethnic background and the broader national culture. You can navigate and appreciate both worlds.
That makes a lot of sense. Feeling a sense of belonging and connection to multiple cultures can be a real asset, a source of strength and resilience.
Right. And it can actually help students feel more confident and successful in both their academic pursuits and their social lives.
Mm.
So it's not about rejecting one culture for another. It's about finding a way to integrate and appreciate both.
It's about embracing the richness and complexity of your own identity. And that can actually be a powerful asset in navigating a diverse world.
And then there's this whole other concept that the review brings up, which is stereotype threat.
Oh, right. That's the idea that negative stereotypes about a particular group's abilities can actually hinder their performance. Like if you're constantly being told that people from your background aren't good at math, that very belief can actually make you perform worse in math.
Yeah, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're aware of a negative stereotype about your group, that awareness can create anxiety and actually undermine your performance.
It's like this insidious psychological barrier that gets internalized, and it can be particularly damaging for students who are already facing other challenges and obstacles.
And it's not just about academic performance. It can affect how students see themselves and their potential. It can limit their aspirations and make them less likely to even try in certain areas.
It's a reminder that words and perceptions have real-world consequences, and that combating negative stereotypes and promoting positive images of success within different cultural groups is crucial. So we've got these individual level psychological barriers like stereotype threat. But the review also talks about broader cultural differences that can create challenges, right?
Yeah, they talk about cultural discontinuities between the home environment and the school environment.
Oh, right. So the values and norms that are emphasized at home might not always align with the values and norms that are emphasized at school, and that can create tension and confusion for students, particularly those from minority backgrounds.
Exactly. And the review talks about how in some cultures there might be a stronger emphasis on collectivism, on interdependence, on the importance of family and community.
Right, whereas schools often emphasize individual achievement, competition, and self-reliance. So that can be a real clash of values.
Yeah, and it can sometimes lead to what they call resistance to schooling.
Okay, so it's not necessarily outright rebellion, but more of a subtle pushback against the dominant values and practices of the school system.
Right, like a sense of not quite fitting in, not feeling fully understood or respected.
And that can make it harder for students to engage and thrive. But the review doesn't suggest that we should just try to erase those cultural differences, right? It's not about assimilating everyone into a single homogenous culture.
No, not at all. In fact, they emphasize that trying to make home and school cultures identical isn't the solution.
So it's about finding ways to bridge those differences, to create a more inclusive and culturally sensitive learning environment.
Yeah, and they give some examples of strategies that can help with that, like incorporating cooperative learning into the classroom.
Oh, right. That's where students work together in small groups, helping each other learn.
Exactly. And that's been shown to be effective across various cultural backgrounds.
Because it taps into those values of collaboration and interdependence that might be more prevalent in certain cultures. So it's a way of acknowledging and valuing those different ways of learning.
And it also helps students develop those important social and communication skills that are essential for success in life, regardless of your background.
So it's not just about accommodating different cultures, it's about creating a learning environment that benefits everyone.
Right. And then there's this idea of acculturation, which comes into play here
Well,
too.
yes, that's about how well individuals are adapting to the dominant culture while also maintaining their own cultural identity. So it's about finding that balance, navigating between those two worlds.
And the review highlights that students who have positive attitudes towards both their ethnic culture and the broader culture that they're living in, they tend to do better in school.
So it's not about rejecting one culture for another, it's about finding a way to integrate and appreciate both.
Exactly. And that can be a real challenge, especially for young people who are still figuring out their own identities.
It requires a lot of self-awareness, resilience, and support from both their families and the school system. But the rewards are huge. When students feel comfortable and confident in their own skin, when they feel like they belong, it creates a much more positive and productive learning environment. So we've seen how this initial optimism about future goals can be complicated by things like limited opportunities, discrimination, stereotype threat, and cultural differences. It's a much more nuanced picture than we initially thought.
It definitely is. But then the review shifts gears a little bit,
Okay.
and it starts to look at how some minority communities are actually incredibly successful at fostering academic achievement.
Oh, that's interesting. So they're looking at what's working, at the factors that contribute to success, even in the face of those challenges we just discussed?
Exactly. And they call this cultures of success.
Okay, I like that term. It suggests that success isn't just about individual effort. It's about the collective values and practices that support and nurture that effort.
Right. So this part of the review focuses on the cultural norms and practices within the families and communities that actively support educational achievement.
So it's about understanding how some minority groups are more effective at mobilizing resources and creating environments that promote academic success.
Exactly. And they talk about this family investment, which can take a lot of different forms.
So it's not just about money, it's about the time, energy, and effort that families pour into their children's education.
Right. And it can be both direct, like actively helping with homework or being involved in school activities, and indirect.
Okay, what do you mean by indirect investment? What are some examples of that?
Things like creating a structured home environment, a disciplined routine, instilling a strong work ethic in their kids. These are things that might not directly relate to academics, but they lay the foundation for success.
That makes sense. It's about creating an environment where learning is valued, where hard work is expected, and where children feel supported and encouraged in their academic pursuits.
Right. And the review emphasizes that these indirect forms of support can be incredibly important, especially for families who might not be as familiar with the specific workings of the school system.
So it's not about knowing all the answers or being able to tutor your kids in every subject. It's about creating that culture of support and high expectations.
And the review introduces this really fascinating concept of folk models of success.
Okay, what are those? I've never heard that term before.
So these are essentially culturally specific ideals and beliefs about what success looks like and how to achieve it. It's like the shared stories and narratives within a community that really emphasize the importance of education.
So it's not just about abstract values, it's about concrete examples of how education has been a pathway to success for people within that community.
Mm,
It's about role models and inspiring stories that make those abstract values come alive.
exactly. And the review gives some really interesting examples of these folk models.
Okay, I'm curious, what are some of those examples? How do different cultures define and promote educational success?
So one example is the Punjabi Sikh community.
Okay.
Education is deeply ingrained as a moral good, like a core part of their religious and cultural identity.
So it's not just about getting a good job or making money, it's about fulfilling a deeper purpose.
Right. And another example is many Asian American communities.
Okay.
They often view academic achievement as a source of family honor.
So doing well in school is seen as a way of honoring your family and bringing pride to your community.
Exactly. It's about contributing to something bigger than yourself. And these deeply held cultural beliefs can be really powerful motivators.
It's not just about individual ambition, it's about fulfilling those collective expectations and making your family and community proud. So these folk models provide a really powerful framework for understanding how certain minority groups maintain high aspirations and achieve success even in the face of adversity.
Yeah. And it often leads to what the review describes as family-oriented achievement motivation.
Okay, so it's not just about the individual's desire to succeed, but it's also about how that success is intertwined with their family's well-being and honor.
Exactly. Young people see their academic achievements as directly contributing to their family's status and success.
So it becomes a much more powerful and meaningful motivator. It's not just about them, it's about something bigger.
Yeah. And the review even cites research on Turkish youth that shows this strong interconnectedness between personal achievement and family loyalty.
It's about honoring your family by striving for excellence. And it's fascinating how these collectivist values, which are often contrasted with the individualistic values of Western societies, can actually serve as a really potent driver of academic success.
Right. And it's not just limited to certain cultures. Even within more individualistic societies, we often see how family support and a sense of belonging can be incredibly motivating for students.
It's about feeling connected to something larger than yourself, whether it's your family, your community, or a cause you believe in. That sense of purpose can fuel incredible drive and determination. But after exploring all these cultural factors, the review then shifts gears again and starts to look at what they call perceived instrumentality and internal regulation.
Yeah, so now we're moving from the broad cultural level to a more individual psychological level.
So it's about understanding the motivational processes that are at play within individual students, regardless of their background.
Right. And this is where it gets really interesting, because they're basically saying that it's not just about having future goals.
Okay, so it's not enough to just have those big dreams and aspirations. There's something more to it than that.
Exactly. It's about how strongly students believe that what they're doing right now in school will actually help them achieve those future goals.
So it's about the perceived connection between their present efforts and their future aspirations.
Right. They call this perceived instrumentality.
Okay, I see. So it's not just about having goals. It's about believing that your current actions are actually instrumental in reaching those goals. It's about seeing the pathway, the link between where you are now and where you want to be.
Yeah. And the review highlights a ton of research that shows that this perceived instrumentality is super important for both motivation and learning.
So students who have a clear sense of how doing well in school connects to their future goals, they tend to be more motivated and engaged.
Exactly. And they also tend to adopt more effective learning strategies.
So they're not just passively absorbing information, they're actively engaging with the material and trying to make sense of it.
Right. They're not just memorizing facts or trying to get by. They're trying to understand the material deeply because they see how it's relevant to their future success.
It's like they're building a bridge between their current efforts and their future aspirations.
Yeah, and the review also talks about this really interesting dynamic aspect of future goals.
Okay, what's that?
So it's about how much value and importance we actually place on those future rewards. Like, even if a goal is way off in the future, if we see a clear path from our actions now to achieving that goal, and if that goal is something we really care about, it keeps us motivated.
It's about the pull of the future, how much it actually draws us forward.
Right. And that pull can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And this perceived instrumentality isn't just about those tangible external rewards.
Okay, so it's not just about getting a good job or making a lot of money.
No, it can also be about those internal rewards, like personal growth, a sense of mastery, or making a positive impact on the world.
So it's about aligning your goals with your values and your passions.
Right. And the review introduces this concept of internal regulation, which is all about whether those future goals feel self-determined and personally meaningful to the student, or if they feel imposed by external forces.
So it's the difference between pursuing a goal because you genuinely want to achieve it, because it aligns with your own values and aspirations, versus pursuing it because someone else expects you to or because you feel pressured to.
Exactly. And research suggests that when our future goals are more internally regulated, when they feel like our own, we're more likely to be intrinsically motivated.
So it's not just about the external reward, it's about the joy and satisfaction of the learning process itself.
And the review even talks about this idea of endogenous instrumentality, where the present task and the future goal are in the same motivational category.
Okay, so it's like that perfect alignment where what you're doing right now is directly and obviously related to what you aspire to do in the future.
Yeah, like a budding musician who's diligently practicing their instrument because they dream of becoming a professional musician someday.
So the present effort is inherently rewarding because it's directly contributing to that long-term goal. It's not a chore. It's a joyful and meaningful step towards a desired future.
Exactly. And this type of instrumentality, where there's that natural connection between the present and the future, seems to be especially effective at fostering intrinsic motivation.
Because there's that inherent sense of purpose. You're not just going through the motions, you're actively building your future one step at a time. And what about those cultural differences and systemic barriers we discussed earlier? How do they play into this idea of perceived instrumentality and internal regulation?
Well, the review suggests that if students don't believe that doing well in school will actually lead to real opportunities for them, their motivation is going to take a hit.
So if they feel like those opportunities are limited, that the system is rigged against them, even the most ambitious goals might not be enough to keep them motivated.
Right. And future goals that feel imposed from the outside might not be as effective as those that are internally driven and personally meaningful.
It's about having agency, feeling like you have control over your own destiny.
Exactly. And that sense of agency can be especially important for minority students who might already be facing those external barriers. But the review does highlight some encouraging findings. Even across different cultures, that positive perception of instrumentality, that belief that your efforts will pay off, it's consistently linked to higher motivation.
So even in the face of those challenges, if students can maintain that belief, that hope for a better future through education, it can make a huge difference.
Yeah, and what's really surprising is that the review even mentions that minority youth, in some cases, might be even more motivated by future goals that they feel a strong sense of control over.
So when you're facing external barriers, having that internal drive, that sense of ownership over your goals becomes even more crucial.
Right. It's like if I can't control the world around me, at least I can control my own efforts and my own direction. So to sum it all up, the review suggests that the impact of future goals on motivation and learning in multicultural classrooms is super complex.
It's not just about having goals, it's about how those goals are perceived, how connected they feel to the present, and how much ownership students feel over them.
Exactly. And while that initial immigrant optimism is a powerful force, the reality is that things like limited opportunities and cultural differences can create some significant challenges.
But by understanding these more nuanced concepts of perceived instrumentality and internal regulation, we can start to develop more effective strategies for supporting all students in their educational journeys.
Yeah, and the key seems to be helping students see that link between their current efforts and their future aspirations, and to encourage them to take ownership of their goals. That's what seems to really make a difference.
So it's not just about telling them that education is important, it's about showing them how it's relevant to their lives, to their dreams, to their unique paths.
Right, and it's about creating those supportive environments where they feel empowered to take charge of their own learning and their own future.
And that leaves us with a really important question to consider. How can we, as educators, as parents, as communities, create those kinds of learning environments? How can we strengthen that perceived link between schoolwork and future aspirations? And how can we support students in developing that sense of internal regulation, that ownership over their goals?
Yeah, it's a complex challenge, but it's one that's definitely worth tackling. Because when we can help students connect those dots, when we can ignite that inner spark, we unlock incredible potential.
We empower them to become the architects of their own futures. And that's what truly transformative education is all about.